Welcome to our Midwest Band and Orchestra Clinic. Hindsight is 2020, envisioning our way forward. I'm Rebecca McLeod, and I'm a string education professor at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro.
And I am David Pope. I'm a music education professor at Baldwin Wallace Conservatory. Rebecca, I know 2020 has been a challenging year for all of us. So as you reflect back on 2020 for you, what did you learn in 2020?
I think the most important thing that I learned or I'm taking away from 2020 is that teachers are resilient. We were handed an incredibly difficult task. And whether teachers were online, in person, a hybrid of both synchronous or asynchronous, we kept going and we kept finding solutions. And some of those solutions really have led to some powerful resources and powerful lessons. What did you learn?
Rebecca, I completely agree with you. Teachers in 2020 to me are superheroes. I have the greatest respect for any teacher that has gone through 2020 and tried to navigate all of this. But I've also learned that in 2020, this has been a stressful situation for everybody that's involved in education. I think about the students trying to figure this out at home, the parents who are trying to keep their job, but also be homeschool teachers to their children. But then also the teachers. I mean, it's so much stress. I think to the picture on the upper left-hand corner of the screen, and that has been me many times, but it's been me probably with a lot more tears and a lot more books piled up next to me and how stressful this is.
Oh, I was definitely that little girl in the bottom right-hand corner, rubbing my eyes and holding my head after spending 8 hours or more a day on the computer. Uh,
I completely understand. I think the big thing we all just have to realize is 2020 is just a giant dumpster fire. And we have to learn what we can from it and move on because we know 2021 is going to be so much better.
that's right. So I think out of that fire, we can salvage some important lessons. And David and I had the opportunity to think about this and really agreed that these three things were things that we learned. The first one was that the person is so much more important than the music. We're teaching people, not orchestra. Orchestra happens to be what we are teaching people, or violin, cello, viola, bass, but the person is much more important. If we didn't learn anything else from 2020, we also learned that we have issues with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that teachers have to diversify the curriculum. We have to look beyond our personal beliefs about what we're teaching and why we're teaching it so that we can really engage and give every student what they need. And finally, I think we learned that students can take more responsibility in the learning process than we realized. And in the current environment, if they didn't take more responsibility, we really ran into challenges. So teachers had to figure out how to let go of a lot of the things and hand it over to the students.
Rebecca, I can't agree with you more on those three items. For me, the biggest one, even when I was in person, was I always wanted to remember the students come first. The music is secondary, as you said. I think back as I'm looking at all these pictures that are flashing on the screen and reminiscing about all my former students. And I found myself checking in with them, not to ask about music, to see how they're doing as people. I think that's really important to remember as we go forward, that the students are more important. We have to be compassionate about what they may have experienced during the pandemic. We have to understand that some of them may have gotten sick, lost family members, had to move. Parents may have lost jobs. They may have become the caregiver of their younger siblings. I think those are things that we really have to remember, that as much as we love orchestra and making music, that they have other responsibilities that they have to pay attention to. And I think as a teacher, for me, I may not be able to fully understand what my students experienced during 2020 and COVID.
It's so true. I remember one of the very first lessons in my partnership, students logged in online, fifth grade students. And the first little gal to log in, I asked her, how was online learning going? And she just choked up. And, I realized right away that this is really difficult. This is really difficult for the student as well as the teacher. So putting them first and really connecting with them just seems so important.
I love how you said connecting with them. To me, relationships are key to the whole learning process. I think it's really important that we build positive relationships with our students. There's a great quote I love from Rita Pearson's TED Talk that is, students won't learn from someone they don't like. I like to add a little something on the end of that is, students won't learn from someone they don't like and they don't trust. As I'm moving forward, and it doesn't matter if we're in person, online, hybrid, synchronous, asynchronous, teaching in a tent outside in a parking lot that some of us are doing, is the relationships are what I'm going to focus on with the students. I'm going to nurture the existing relationships, the students that I've stayed in contact with. I'm going to focus on building new relationships with all of my new students. And then I'm really going to try to rebuild those relationships with students that might have fallen off the map a little bit, or kind of just gotten lost in all of this online learning and everything else that's gone on for the last 9 months.
Absolutely. One of the things that I don't know about anybody else, I struggled with right away was students did not, I was teaching online and students did not want to turn on their cameras. And to teach, first of all, I don't think it was good for them and it wasn't good for teachers. And you still may be in this situation, but students did not want to turn on the camera. So you're a teacher and it's really hard to build a relationship with someone that you can't see or hear. And right away, we started finding ways to engage students. One of the first accidental discoveries was a scavenger hunt. We did an open string scavenger hunt. And in order to play the scavenger hunt, my students had to turn on their video cameras, show us the object they'd found, and then turn it off. So this was a simple string review, like, what's one of your open strings? And a student would say, an A. So we would all turn our cameras off, and for most of the students, their camera was already off, and they ran around their house and found something that started with the letter A. And then in order to show it to your friends, you had to turn your camera on. Well, by the time we'd gone through A and then D, we'd met everybody's dogs, and the cello C string and viola C string, we met everyone's cats. But by the end of the game, everybody was laughing, smiling, and their cameras were on. And for me, that was the day that online learning changed, because we were all able to engage with one another. It was a huge change for the class.
Rebecca, I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. I think that's important with beginners. I think that's important with middle schoolers, high schoolers, even my college students. I gave my college students a tour of my house at one point by walking around with my laptop, and they would give me tours of their apartments and things like that, or their dorm rooms. We crave connections. And I think that's one of the big connections I take away from this, with relationships. And I think you also, with your scavenger hunt, you gave the students a reason to attend class. And I think the last part of what we need to do as teachers is find a way to interact with our students every day on a personal level. And maybe it's before class, maybe it's after class. We have to make those interactions we used to have with our students in the hallways, before or after class, or we saw them in the cafeteria. We have to transfer that to online learning and really connect with them that way.
Yeah.
The other thing I learned, Rebecca, is we have to pay attention to ourselves as teachers.
Oh,
Teaching orchestra in normal time is incredibly hard, much less in a pandemic. Orchestra teachers are always struggling to balance their work life, their family, their own self-care. But then we add on to that all the expectations that are put on us by our students, because tradition, things we've done in the past, their parents, our school administrators, other people in our school, the surrounding community. And I think what's really hard is the expectations we put on ourselves. I know for me and you, I think we will both qualify ourselves as workaholics, and we have a hard time saying no to things. And so I find it ironic that we're kind of giving this advice, but it's something I've learned from 2020 and all this too, is I know in the past I've struggled with, I never feel like I do enough or give enough time to my students. And I think that's something that we've all struggled with before, that we have to learn as we go forward.
yeah. I definitely met my capacity, and found out that I guess the term is at capacity or beyond capacity. And I had this lesson that I had to learn multiple times, which was to slow down the amount of content I was trying to cover. And it wasn't possible to continue with the goals of the past in the same way. I found myself taking a concept and allowing students to deal with that one concept more deeply from a variety of angles. but I wasn't able to cover the amount of material I'd covered in the past for all of the reasons that teachers understand. We were online, students were missing class, or we were in person in smaller cohorts. I mean, I just saw the students so much less. So I really had to let go and change some of those goals that I had.
I think that's something that we all struggle with, Rebecca, is I'm thinking about conversations I've had with teachers and schools, and the ones that are like every year in our first year of instruction, we finish book one of our method book. It's okay if we don't finish book one anymore. It's okay if we don't get to shifting when we got to it in the past.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay if our orchestras aren't playing grade 5 or grade 6 music this year.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I think that learning to let go of those self-created expectations and know it's going to be okay. That's a hard thing to do, but I think that's something important we can hopefully all take from this as we move forward.
So we talked earlier, the second one was to diversify the curriculum and look beyond. So we've had issues with diversity in education and string education for many, many, many years. And the question that teachers are now asking and need to continue asking is, am I serving all of the students in my community? Does your orchestra, does your band, does your choir, does your music program look like the community you serve? Or are there missing faces? And if there are missing faces from your program, we have to step back and ask whether we're providing as a teacher a welcoming space for everyone. One of the most beautiful things I've seen is the bulletin board displayed on our screen now, which shows you a variety of different people playing string instruments. And string instruments are just so eclectic. They're found in so many different cultures. And a teacher that I know took this bulletin board and put in the center of it a mirror. And it said, who plays strings? And you look at all the people, and in the center, the student sees themselves. And I think that's the place that we now realize that we need to open our doors as wide as we can. And if a student comes in the classroom and they can't see themselves in there, then what can we do to change our classroom to make them feel welcome?
Rebecca, that right there embodies my recruitment philosophy when I was recruiting new students. My last job was a Title I district, and what I wanted to do, my goal was when we visited elementary schools to recruit for my middle school program, I wanted the elementary school students to look on the stage and see somebody on that stage that they could personally identify to, that they could go, that's going to be me in a year or 2 or 3 years. I think that's a big thing, a big concept that was eye-opening for me, and I think it's important for the students. And I also think that's true with diversifying teachers and finding more diverse teachers, and I know that's something I'm concentrating on with our music education program. So, Rebecca, now that we're really trying to get our students to diversify our students, how can we make it more meaningful to them once they're in our program?
Yeah, I think including all sorts of examples of people from different cultures and different backgrounds in terms of the composers that we're programming, in terms of the types of music that we're including. This is a list that we just put together, and there are some old standards on here, but there are also a lot of new people that we probably should have known about a long time ago. Do you have any of these people on this list that you're currently teaching or engaging in?
Rebecca, one of my favorites on this list is Adrian Gordon, who actually, I don't know if Adrian started his own publishing company, but I know Adrian publishes a lot of music, and he published a piece a number of years ago called Songs of the Ocean Winds. It's like a grade 2, 2.5 for a middle school orchestra or that level of orchestra. And it's just a great lyrical piece, lots of musical lines, lots of musical moments, a great viola part. And it's a new composer. In my efforts to diversify the repertoire program, it was a new composer I found and actually fell in love with his music. So
That's wonderful. I think we're finally, there's so many resources now that teachers can use to find more diverse composers, and that has been such an important lesson that we've gained from 2020. We also have the issue of diverse musical styles. And, this was an opportunity for us to start including so many different styles, which we could have done in person, but this really kind of pushed us to begin including more diverse styles in the curriculum because there's so much amazing information online. Were you able to incorporate any of these styles into your classroom?
For me, in my students, I would one of my goals when I was teaching public schools, and even with my college students, is to focus on non-classical music, and that can be playing open string warm-ups with pop music, playing them with Western African drumming or things like that. Bluegrass. I'm from Tennessee, so I'm going to like bluegrass and fiddling. So
Yeah.
any chance I could to change it up. I remember a story I had of a student once in Florida who was in my fiddle group because he was in orchestra because he had to be in orchestra to play in the fiddle group. He loved the fiddle group, but he put up with orchestra. And that was a big eye-opening moment for me to go, not everybody wants to play traditional things. And that's something I tried to carry with me from this point forward.
Absolutely. I think that gets into the idea too of making assumptions, which we don't want to do, about what our community needs or wants, or what the students in our classroom might want to do. And so, one of the things that we learned, I think, in the last year was that we need to engage in more conversations with the community. And my own undergraduate students had a great idea to build a website. And on the website, you can see there in the top, it says class playlist. And that was one way that we connected with our students. And you could see we had the Black Panther suite here. And as you scroll down, we had a place where students were able to come in and make requests that the teachers could then review before they included a song. And we could vet the song and make sure that it was something that would be appropriate for the class. But this was a way that we were able to add some motivation and buy-in from the students in our program, but also in a meaningful way instead of guessing what it was that they might be interested in. And we could also thread through all of the standards that we wanted to have across cultures and across styles. So this was a huge learning opportunity for us as teachers.
So Rebecca, now that you kind of engaged your community and you started that really important conversation, how do you take what you learned from those conversations and what you're learning about your students and their families? How do you build that in the classroom to make it more meaningful?
Absolutely. Well, not only are we incorporating things that they've asked for, not just learning how to play those things, but maybe doing movement games to them or other musical activities. But the second piece of this is beyond the music and back to the person. We know pretty clearly now, in terms of culturally relevant pedagogy and culturally responsive pedagogy, that culture impacts the way students learn and that students learn in a variety of ways. And so the more diverse we can be with the types of activities we include in our classroom, the more students' needs we'll be able to meet. So this first video on the left is an example of using kinesthetic music to teach students how to find the beat. It's also an example of getting them to collaborate.
Past, 3, past, 2, 3, say it. Past, past, past.
So I'm in North Carolina, and this is Midnight on the Water. This is an old time tune, and a lot of students are really interested in connecting to and knowing about that music. And students should know about the music because a lot of that music has its roots from where they live. This next video shows us actually transferring the ability to find those rhythms onto the instruments.
Rebecca, before we play the next video, I want to point out one thing from the last one.
Yeah.
The young man in the white t-shirt, he has a giant smile on his face the entire,
Yeah.
and I've never noticed that as I've watched that video before. It makes me really smile.
They're having a great time.
So here's your next video.
it's about really providing many opportunities in different ways for them to demonstrate that they have that B competence. Um, but probably the most powerful lesson for me was the idea that some cultures really value group product and group process over individual outcome. And allowing my students to work in groups and problem solve on their own was something that really increased their engagement and their understanding rather than me always delivering the information. This last video is a group of young fifth grade girls, and they were given boiled and cabbage to play, but they had the wrong bass line. They had the incorrect music, and they had to discuss and figure out why the chords were incorrect and solve the musical problem. And this is the outcome. After they had lots of discussion, they came to this performance.
Ready, go. Okay, so you're doing bass line? Yeah. Okay, ready, set, go.
So I got to tell you, handing over your class to fifth graders for 10 minutes can sometimes be difficult without wanting to intervene. But watching them solve that musical problem and figuring out when the chords change from 1, 4, 5 to 1 was an amazing lesson for me. And it really, again, taught me that lesson about letting go.
And Rebecca, I think part of that for me too, as you're talking about this, is I know it may seem like it takes longer to get students to understand concepts if we let go of the process and let them take charge. But I think they learn more, and the long-term gains are so much more substantial when it's almost a self-guided activity that we can oversee versus us just telling them exactly what to do.
That's right. So I guess that brings us back to our third point, which is students can take more responsibility in the learning process, but that means that the teacher has to let it go.
Let it go, let it go.
Oh, David.
I'm sorry, Rebecca. I had to throw some kind of Easter egg in here for you. So, Rebecca, I wholeheartedly agree with you about we have to empower the students in the learning process. I think some of the things that I've taken away from this is the surprising ways some students have taken ownership of some of this online, virtual, hybrid, face-to-face, outside learning that is going on right now. I love hearing the stories of my colleagues telling me about when they're in an online class and all of a sudden Zoom crashes and they get kicked out of class, but then they log back in and that second violin or that violist or the bass player has taken over class and has now become the teacher. That makes me smile. And I'm like, I want that kid to become a teacher later on in their life. Some other ones I know we've all struggled with, and where I would really struggle teaching middle schoolers is teaching students when to learn how to tune. We all had in our mind, like, okay, we slowly do this, it takes time. And now we were just thrown to the fire, and we're now teaching students to tune virtually, something we would never thought was possible 9 months ago. And students have figured out, yes, there have been broken strings, but I've learned they can do much more than I thought they could do. And that's something I'm going to take forward.
I have had to give over that tuning responsibility to the students as well. And I'm amazed when I watch fifth grade students successfully tuning their instrument online. The other thing that we've learned is that older students and older mentors are just as effective online as they are in person. There was a project that the students in my partnership, which is grades 5 through 12, undertook along with some of my undergraduates, and they made online tutorials with older students as the mentor for younger students. And I think you have an example of this on here, and it's also an example of an opportunity for a flipped classroom.
Rebecca, I do. I was able to pull this from your YouTube channel, so it's a great resource. So here's your video.
Hi pals, my name is Maggie and I'm here to help you learn how to play the open string blues. So let's grab our violins and let's begin. 1, 2, let's start with E. Now A.
Yeah, and everyone in this video except
Now
me
E.
who to the age of 20.
Now G. Let's do it again.
Yeah, so we have a series of these, and they're made for older students for younger students. And so whether it's online or even in a live synchronous situation, these students are helping one another and providing additional instruction.
Rebecca, I love that. The fact that there's, whether it's high schoolers mentoring middle schoolers, middle schoolers mentoring elementary schoolers, or in your case, college students supporting public school younger students all over. And I think that's a really great thing. Some other things I've learned, and I've seen students take ownership that I didn't expect, where students forming their own chamber groups. And I love the fact that I've seen friends post online that they're giving porch concerts in their neighborhood when it's just a couple kids that live in the same neighborhood, and they're just playing music together, something that I know we all yearn for. And so I think that's another big thing that I've taken away from this is I think we can encourage more of those type of activities moving forward. One of the big things that I took away from this as we're really moving forward is flipping my classroom, putting more ownership, putting more responsibilities on the students outside of class. This pandemic kind of forced me to make videos and instructional things that I'd wanted to do for a long time, but I never had time to do. I still didn't have time to do it, but I still found time to do it because I forced myself to. And I think learning to flip our classrooms and all the online content that is coming available. I know you have a YouTube channel. Charles Louts out of Atlanta has a great orchestra website called orchestrateacher.net. And so I think between those, all the instructional videos that are showing up on Facebook, on YouTube, I find myself subscribing to a new YouTube channel on a daily basis or saving things. I think all the online resources that we have, we shouldn't forget after the pandemic is over. We need to find a way to incorporate those into our curriculums and use those to enhance our teaching at school and even move our teaching at school ahead at a faster pace as we're moving forward.
You know, and don't forget, out of all of the innovations that we've had this semester, and I'm going to use them all as we move forward, don't forget the dowel rod bow. I mean, having to teach students online really forced us to figure out how to help people physically from a distance. So here's my dowel rod bow. It's got my little frog made out of a clothespin, and of course my milkshake straw, so we can practice sliding back and forth.
Rebecca, you make me smile because one, I use dowel rods too. This is something I borrowed from you years ago. Yours is much nicer than mine with your fancy like bow. Mine's just a stick with a straw. I do want to say a positive to online teaching with dowel rod bows is we don't have to worry about kids in class putting the milkshake straws in their mouth and then passing them around. That's something that I don't have to worry about when they're at home as much as I do when they're at school.
Oh, the glory of the mute button. And they can all noodle around and not bother each other while they try out their tunes. That was actually a great thing to have during this online teaching process. So I think we've come full circle. These are our 3 lessons. The person's more important than the music. Diversify the curriculum and look beyond your personal beliefs. And students can and should take more responsibility in the learning process.
Rebecca, I think as I'm moving forward personally, if I can do those 3 things and keep those in mind in my planning and my curriculum, and just as a person, I think those are 3 great takeaways from this last 9 months that I know we've all struggled to get through. And we're going to come out of this better on the other side. I have so much faith in orchestra teachers across the country.
That's right. Thank you so much for attending our Midwest session.